Hello and welcome back to my channel. Apologies if there's been a little bit of a delay. There is, I'd say, a number of reasons why it's taking a little longer to produce any kind of part 2 as it might have been titled from my original video, but I think I found that it's going to be more helpful for myself as a point of reference, but also to everyone that might find these of use, to make sure that these are, I suppose, as concise and informative, and also perhaps not specifically pertaining to the COVID-19 situation as well, because these ways that I'll be mentioning with regards to ways to manage anxiety can be utilised beyond the situation that we have at the moment. But certainly to start off with, I'd like to draw attention to the situations that we're all finding ourselves in, because I think this is an anxiety-inducing time for everyone, and whether we are having a lot more time, so ample time on our hands working from home, or indeed whether we have even less than before because we're having to juggle all these different responsibilities that might be coming along with this situation. This is an opportunity to be able to recalibrate, perhaps, so being able to recalibrate our perception on our lives, but also recalibrate the activities that we're doing in the days to kind of ensure that we're maintaining a healthier state of being. Now, this is certainly easier said than done, and that's probably a big reason why this video is has taken longer to come out, because it's quite tough to remanage what you're doing in your days, and in fact it's very easy to fall back into any patterns of ease, so kind of seeking out comforts and perhaps overusing them and abusing them a little bit. I'm certainly guilty of that in terms of things like video games. So I would like to first of all draw attention to what's known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, this is something that was developed I believe in the mid-50s, and it's still utilised. It's kind of a basic framework. I'll have it up here somewhere, and I think it's really useful to draw attention to, because we're currently operating at the kind of lower bases now. We were, I think a lot of us anyway, were being able to, we were fortunate enough that we were able to get past these lower echelons of the hierarchy, so we had our basic needs satisfied, and we felt more comfortable and able to move into these upper echelons of kind of self-esteem and self-actualization. COVID-19 knocks us all straight back, because this is a time of uncertainty where it's life or death for some people, so it drops us down into that lower end of the hierarchy. And what that means is that we're going to struggle to try and self-actualize, we're going to struggle to shift around our lives, we're going to have a lot of difficulties with these kinds of things. So this opportunity that I alluded to is my introduction. It's a lot easier said than done, and I think we should draw attention to why that is. And it's exactly as Maslow's hierarchy has stated, is that we can only reach these upper levels when the lower ends are satisfied. The reason I've drawn attention to Maslow's hierarchy here is that it seems to me, and it seems the conversations I'm having with a lot of patients that I'm working with at the moment, is that there's a lot of discomfort and guilt around the situation that they're in. So they might have more opportunity, for example, to change some things, but they don't feel like they can, and that can create real feelings of discontent and lots of negative self-talk. So what I'd like to do is just having that in your mind. If you are trying to change things in the day, if you are, you're wanting to shift around things in your life, but you're kind of struggling to do that, then there's a reason for it. There is a reason that this is difficult, and it's absolutely not something that we can I suppose degrade ourselves internally for, because this is natural. It's supposed to be difficult. So what I'm going to be offering, although they are kind of practical ways that we can try and reduce our anxiety around what's going on at the moment, just remembering that at the end of the day we are still here, we are still in the present, and we are fulfilling that bottom end criteria at the moment. If you're fortunate enough to be here watching this video on this hierarchy, if you're able to access things like having regular shelter and food, albeit quite scary, going to the shops can be a lot more traumatizing than it ever was in the past, but it can be really helpful to take note and take stock of the fact that we are currently in this moment safe, and in this moment we are healthy. I know there can be a lot of anxiety around, well, what if I'm already carrying it and all of these things. we must remember to always center ourselves into what we can currently experience now, because once we start going down that line of what if things are actually worse than they appear. And so I mentioned in my last video there can be quite a hole that you can fall down into trying to understand everything hypothetically and think about all the worst case scenarios. We love doing that as humans, but it's the feeling that comes along with all of that uncertainty and the feeling that comes along with the associated worst case scenario, we will internalize to a degree as it having already happened. So just being mindful of this can be really powerful in and of itself. So what I'd first like to draw your attention to is breathing exercise that's sent over by a good friend of mine, and it's actually from Queen's Hospital. It's one of the doctors there, and he's describing an exercise that he's found quite helpful amongst patients that I think can satiate some anxiety, just having it as a resource and a technique that we're aware of, which I'll link it down below. But breathing just as a whole is really important in these days, because one of the first things that can tend to slip is our ability to, or our automatic tendency to take deeper breaths, that we start to shallow when we're feeling quite anxious. So just making an active effort to say, okay, I need to check in on my body. Am I breathing in a way that's going to inspire feelings of comfort, or am I breathing in a way that's kind of like short breaths, like it's a predator around? These kinds of it can be very triggering for our limbic system, which is the fight or flight response system in the brain, as it might start to associate our kinds of breathing with a threat, and that can then trigger off a lot of other physical symptoms like sweating or shaking or nausea. Lots of these kind of panic symptoms that people can experience quite regularly in this state of lockdown. And these are all perfectly normal feelings to experience, because it's a natural response from this part of our brain that's been developed over millions and millions of years to prevent us from being successfully hunted by predators. It's just, it doesn't discern between what is a predator and what isn't. It doesn't have the ability to understand language, for example, like the rest of our brains do. It's also why we can't tell ourselves to calm down physically. We can't say, okay, just calm down, and our body will follow, because that part of our brain doesn't communicate like that, if you see what I mean. There's lots of interesting resources on how fight or flight works, and it can be very important to get that understanding down. If you are experiencing panic symptoms, I'd say that's half of the treatment that we do within cognitive behavioural therapy. So as well as that, I've been having a chat with some of the therapists within my service, and I think having a degree of self-compassion, or just kind of utilising some kind words to yourself, you're saying it's okay to feel this way, it's really quite useful. But I do want to say this can be really tough, and if you are one of those people that really struggles to talk to yourself in these kind of kind ways, then that's okay. It's certainly not your fault, but I would recommend taking a look into some formal therapy, because there are ways that you can have some support in being able to be more compassionate with yourself. So certainly take a look and see if you are able to pacify yourself a little bit, and pacifying yourself actively as well was the other suggestion, through things like self-soothers. So this can be really comforting smells or soft feelings. I think there's this is a perfect example. I've got a blanket here that's got really smooth, so like almost like velvety feeling of a texture. This kind of texture can be really, I suppose, bringing you back to a time where perhaps soft things are associated more. So perhaps a really young childhood, if you're wrapped up in warm blankets. Weighted blankets, I think, as well have a lot of association with the more early developmental years, when we were very comforted by having things wrapped around us. These still work in adulthood, and I would certainly recommend doing so. There should be no negative associations with these kinds of things, because soothers of any sort, things like essential oils as well, they can have an impact and they can soothe our emotions. It's whatever we feel works for us, though, because each person will have different needs, different things that they feel comfortable and safe within. And I'd also like to draw attention to the fact that, although I mentioned at the start, utilising these soothing behaviours, so for mine I'd say video games have been quite a pivotal one in my life. It's okay to do these things, it's just making sure that there's a balance, so you're not kind of going too far, utilising these behaviours as a distraction, a constant distraction, so we can kind of push away and kind of forget everything indefinitely. So absolutely utilize these behaviors, but just remember that we can incorporate other areas of our lives alongside this, because it doesn't all have to be soothing, and it certainly doesn't all have to be work, because I think that's another thing that a lot of people can fall into. This time's all about balance, and I think both extroverts, who are really obviously having difficulty with the lack of contact, will be learning how to manage more independently, and likewise introverts, who have perhaps to start with were very, very comfortable with the situation, and can speak from personal experience here. There will be a newfound appreciation perhaps of the value of connection and the value of at least having the option to socialise. So I think I'm feeling quite positive about the advancements that we might make socially once this lockdown has ended, because I think both parties have learned something here, and certainly both parties will be realising just the sheer necessity of communication, of connection between people, because we really are deeply social animals, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, and I'm very happy that this is something that people have started to notice and take stock of. Thank you very much for watching this video. Got a slightly different ending as my camera died right before the end. Typical, as you would expect. I do hope that you enjoyed watching, and hopefully the music in the background wasn't distracting, or perhaps added another layer. I've been doing some different stuff on this keyboard behind me here, and thought that it might be nice to integrate this creative endeavour with this more, I suppose, academic or intellectual pursuit that we're going for on the side on this YouTube channel. So I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.